So Fallout, recently, it's been everywhere, especially since the airing of Season 1 and 2 of the Fallout TV show. You know, the show that the hardcore fans can't decide if they like or hate it. From the depiction of the Brotherhood of Steel to the Legion. Personally, I did not expect Macaulay Culkin, the Home Alone kid, to be a part of the Legion, to say the least. He comes off as more of a vault dweller, to be honest. There were some timeline issues, incest being mentioned like almost every episode.
And that's not including all of the cousin stuff I did, which is at least a page or two on my resume, so looks like—
Which ending of Fallout New Vegas was used for Season 2 not being clear, with most thinking it was the Yes Man ending, but some have found issues with that if that is indeed the ending they went with. There was barely any mention of the career at all, or their involvement, and overall hardcore fans just thought it was a phlegm-filled spit on the franchise and Fallout New Vegas in general, with some even speculating Toddy Boy himself had something to do with it because he apparently was always jealous that the Obsidian studio instead of the Bethesda studio was responsible for one of the best games in the series with its story, choices, and overall player experience. But yeah, Todd was apparently so jealous he took the reins for directing the story in Season 2 and somehow ruined the legacy of New Vegas. Well, that's what some are theorising. I didn't think it was that bad. I did soy face and point at the screen with the one reference with the NCR Ranger shooting the Deathclaw, and I especially liked the scene where House is reactivated, especially with the music. But yeah, in my opinion, the show wasn't that bad. We could have gotten worse. We could have got the erectile dysfunction that was the Halo TV series, or even worse, the bastardization that was the Borderlands movie. But the show opened the Fallout franchise and universe to a lot of new people, which even included some of the actors of the show who innocently enough just wanted to try the source material, but were evidently led astray by the loyal fan base. And yeah, that was a complete hoax, by the way. This was a fake account and everybody fell for it. But yeah, a lot of people were introduced to the Fallout games from the show, mainly Fallout New Vegas, Fallout 4 and 3. But unfortunately nobody is touching my favourite Fallout, and in my opinion the best one, and is a direct RimWorld compare, Fallout Shelter. Don't worry, just to clarify, that was a joke. I already know some of you have started writing a whole research paper with multiple slurs in the comments just from that sentence alone, but there is also a more infamous game some have picked up, mainly because it's one of the latest additions to the franchise, no matter how much Fallout fans want to ignore it ever existed, and this game was indirectly responsible for a rise in country music, specifically the resurgence of the song Country Roads, and that was Fallout 76, the game that is viewed as one of the worst Fallout games, behind Fallout Brotherhood of Steel and Fallout Tactics, although some may argue even those are better. It's also viewed as one of Bethesda's biggest fumbles, which would have been accurate a few years ago if Starfield didn't exist. I think the only people still playing Starfield are the people that fully modded it to be like the Star Wars universe, and it is actually impressive and probably the only way you can get people to play Starfield nowadays. But Fallout 76, a game that had one of the worst launches in gaming history, and that is saying something since most Bethesda games are usually buggy on launch. I think even the Aztecs could have predicted that this would have had problems with Bethesda's history. However, Fallout 76 was apparently an exception to this expectation, because even before the launch it was viewed as a complete disaster with a beta that was riddled with glitches and was said to be very boring. There was even a bug with the beta where if you downloaded it and tried to launch it, it would just delete itself, and some couldn't even uninstall the beta if they wanted to, on top of having one of the biggest lies in pre-order bundle history, including a bag that was claimed to be made of the highest canvas material, but when it finally did arrive after multiple setbacks and excuses, it looked nothing like what was advertised, and you could probably get something better from Temu at the cost of your personal information being sold. In fact, probably the best pre-order bundle you could get was one of the cheapest, and was the one I went with, where you get a bunch of pins of the special stats and Vault Boy. And yes, I did step on at least one of the pins and they did break quite easily. An authentic Nuka-Cola beverage was promised called Nuka-Cola Dark with a price tag of $80, which was poorly made and apparently tasted worse than the garbage juice at the bottom of a public bin.
Oh, God, can I swear on this? It's my own show. That's terrible.
This tastes like we're drinking vanilla extract.
A licensed helmet sold primarily at GameStop and made by a separate manufacturer to the collector's edition one had to be recalled because it was susceptible to mold growth. And not to mention all the claims Todd made leading up to the release, like 16 times the detail and revolutionary graphics, which was ironic because the game launched with buggy graphics and a large amount of performance issues, and led to a resurgence in his signature catchphrase, "It just works."
All of this just works.
But yeah, a lot of this was even before the game launched, and when it did launch, it got worse. Servers were broken, quests were glitched, which was the least impactful out of the laundry list of bugs present, and the world was completely void of any human NPCs, where the main quest was this boring slog of following dead people's audio tapes to find a cure for dragon cancer or something. And that is the checklist of what mostly happened in the Internet Historians video on Fallout 76 that everyone saw. The game was terrible at launch, to say the least, and despite going through multiple updates, fixes to the game, and a treasure trove of content being added, the game, at least from the outside, is still known for the reputation it launched with. A buggy, glitchy, hacker-infested, and domestic dispute-filled game.
What's going on right here? I don't give a fuck. I'll play Fallout if I want to tonight. Fuck you. I'll fucking put the dog down just like I did the other one. Yeah, fuck you. Go see your coworker. Yeah, bitch. I took your wedding ring off last night.
This is a reputation that is forever echoed just by mentioning the game, despite the game, as said, going through multiple updates, to the point where it's nothing like what it used to be, yet still has said reputation. Which, yeah, you could fairly chalk up to a side effect of a terrible first impression, but then you look at games like No Man's Sky or Cyberpunk. Do not attempt to abbreviate the name of that last game. Both of these games promised things that were not delivered. They had a terrible release, but with further updates they managed to do a full about 10 with their reputation, to the point where they are now beloved games. Hell, No Man's Sky is face-fucking their fans with content updates to the point where their gluttony knows no bounds, and they're doing it all for free. And Cyberpunk is now considered a masterpiece when it was previously described as being synonymous with dog feces. Some would have even claimed at the time the Lord of the Rings Gollum game was better, but why has Fallout 76 not seen the same change in its reputation, and does it still deserve said reputation?
And I've got to say, in all honesty, it's the biggest piece of dog shit.
So upon 76's launch, as I've reiterated about 20 times already throughout this video, people were disappointed and felt like they were lied to. It was an absolute mess even for Bethesda standards. There was a day one patch which was over 50 gigabytes and was apparently bigger than the game itself, and it did fix a lot of issues with the game, like performance issues and game-breaking bugs, but said update also created more performance issues and game-breaking bugs. But hey, at least the only thing that did work was the Atomic Shop, the thing selling cosmetic items ripped from previous games for extortionate prices. A lot of people attempted to refund the game day one, but because the game wasn't on the Steam platform, and instead was on Bethesda's own platform, leading to a lot of refund requests being stalled or outright refused for weird reasons. Like apparently in one case, if you installed the game, you are immediately illegible for a refund. But with public backlash, potentially a class action lawsuit, and the Australian ACC eventually getting involved, probably because a majority of their population in the Outback that waited a whole month after the release for their download to finally finish, only to then find out the game was complete dog shit.
What? You fucking serious?
They did eventually start rolling out refunds for things like digital copies. Physical copies was a whole different story. Over the next few months since release, Bethesda began rolling out hotfixes and patches to attempt to make the game somewhat stable, but all of that effort would be in vain. A majority of people around this time had already given up on the game and chalked it up as a complete failure. The game was essentially a ghost town, and if you were still playing, you had to cope with hackers, people exploiting the many bugs of the game, and even Bethesda moderation themselves, where they were banning legitimate players. In one instance, a player with over 900 hours was apparently banned for just having too much ammunition in his inventory. But hey, they released a Battle Royale in the summer of the next year. Did you hear about that? Did you know about that? They had a Battle Royale in a Fallout game? When Battle Royales were the peak of gaming? Because if you did hear about it, I'm pretty sure the people that were still playing 76 did not, since especially on console, nobody played it. Lobbies were dead, and they eventually removed it in September of 2021. However, even with all of these issues, a small community still played the game. These people stayed throughout the years, grinding to triple-digit levels and had personal camps that looked better than the official structures within the game. These players were known as veterans, or as Habib called them, ghosts. People that never gave up on the game and were actually known to help new players, either giving them items or escorting them through difficult areas and quests. Now, as a normal person, you would ask yourself, what is wrong with these people? Well, first of all, most of them are in their early 30s, if that explains anything. I know I just used that as a joke, but that is such a wholesome post. This person just wants somebody to play with, and so many people replied to it. It almost gives you hope for humanity. But anyway, it's assumed from the outside you had to either be a lobotomite or have an extremely low standard for games to keep playing this. However, I do sort of understand why they kept playing, because the game was not as unplayable as people made it out to be. I would know because I kept playing it when I was a spam cell even after it was viewed as a failure. Yes, this is the personal part of the video. Did you also know I hate most of you? Admittedly, I only played for a few months after the release and only on console, and I only stopped playing because my PlayStation blew up whilst playing the game. I still don't know if it was because I was playing 76 or because I had to basically domestically abuse my PlayStation to boot sometimes. First of all, I did not encounter as many bugs as other people were seeing, probably due to me being on a console, or I just didn't notice them because I was naive and still had some respect for Bethesda. But even then, I still hated how PvP was the equivalent of two limbless amputees fighting, and how when you died all you lost was your scrap, which was disappointing when you eventually killed someone. And whilst the majority of base game quests were kind of boring, specifically the one where you had to wait at the DMV for your number to be called, and sometimes if you didn't realise it was bugged you'd just wait there like an idiot, but there were some quests that were really good. One of my favourite was the Order of Mysteries or Mistresses questline, where you join a previously secret organisation called the Order of Mysteries that was basically taking orphans and transforming them into Batman, and you follow the process to become one of them and then start following what happened to the members, where it's found out that the organisation was being sabotaged by the headmaster's own daughter, and in the last mission you go to where they would both have their final standoff, which I unfortunately expected to be able to actually witness the epic fight, but you just come across their dead bodies, which makes no sense because they've both been dead for like 20 years before the vault was opened, and they should be bones by now. But you get some cool items out of it, and it was a very interesting story, even if it was mainly told through holotapes. But in general, just exploring the map that Todd heavily emphasized was 4 times bigger but was empty in a lot of places, but coming across places like Deathclaw Island where you quickly learn why it has that name with the radio blasting, that was one of the many things I enjoyed doing when playing the game before I got older, and started getting that guilty feeling that I should be doing something better with my time instead of playing games, even if I did just do a 12-hour shift in the mines. It wasn't a traditional Fallout game, it had way too many problems, and the gameplay at the time did get quickly boring, especially with those little events you used to come across that were way too repetitive and annoying. But it had the framework for what could be a decent game, and I think a lot of people, rightfully so, only base the game on the mess it was on the first day it was released, and that opinion would have some weight behind it for a number of years. But midway through 2020, they would start significantly updating the game to the point where in recent years the game would change in a way where it's nothing like what it was previously, and I don't think in the current year it can still be considered one of the worst games Bethesda has produced.
Yeah! Who won the lottery? I did! Smell that air!
So the first good thing that happened after the release was Todd admitting that the game was not as good as they advertised when they launched it.
Got a lot of criticism, obviously, that looking back we deserved. It's a game that we should have had in a
We can stop the clip there because unfortunately he just keeps talking, listing excuses and starts coping. We only really needed to hear that one line. But surprisingly, Bethesda, or more specifically the other studios they dropped the game on, did not give up on the game. Their first big change was finally releasing the game on Steam, a platform that a lot of people would have preferred, and on the same day they released the Wastelanders update, which finally added human NPCs and quests to the game, with a new vault and quest line that comes with different ways you can complete the quest, and it comes with an actual choice at the end which impacts the newly added factions and the newly added reputation system. My god, it almost resembles an actual Fallout game. But 76 still had a way to go. Yes, they saw a spike of players since their new update and release on Steam, but that would slowly dissipate over time and the game would get a bit boring when you reached a high enough level and you had done everything within the game, which led them to eventually add dungeons and raids to the game, which were difficult, repetitive content primarily for higher leveled players, and you could also get some good loot out of them. But they were actually somewhat hated because of all the bugs present within them, sometimes making it impossible to progress through them, so they would eventually just remove them altogether from the game, instead of working on them, and they would only return years later in 2023 where they were a lot better. With the new Legendary Run update, they added content like the new seasonal scoreboard, which was then later renamed to Seasons, that ran for 3 months at a time, and it was essentially like a battle pass with cosmetics and items that people could earn through doing daily missions. In the One Wastelander for All update, they once again worked on making the gameplay more enjoyable and challenging past a certain level by making it so enemies' levels scale based on the player's own levels, so you weren't just one-shotting everything in sight. They also made changes to the perk system and added a few new enemies to the game. Was 76 good enough now? No. In the next update, they added more quest lines to the game, improved the camp building system, which was one of the main reasons veterans still played the game, and they also adjusted gameplay features like the looting system. But now we were in 2022, and they still weren't done. Remember the pit from Fallout 3 where you get the choice to abduct an infant? The last part wasn't important, but they added a new questline and expedition to revisit the pit, and it was all for free. But admittedly, not everyone liked it. The map was small, some said it just felt like a daily mission in terms of content. And speaking of daily missions, apparently you had to do a repetitive quest just to enter said expedition. They would a year later add another expedition to Atlantic City on top of more content updates. Now the game was doing alright for itself around this time, but none of that would compare to April of 2024, where with the release of the first episode of the TV show, people were hungry for Fallout content, and whilst a lot of them turned to the traditional Fallout games, 76 saw the highest player count it's seen in years, and whilst not all players stayed around, some did and integrated into the regular player base. In June of the same year, they added the first expansion to the map with the Skyline Valley update, and at this point a majority of the Steam reviews for the game had turned from overwhelmingly negative to somewhat positive, and most times you could pick up the game on sale for just £6 or $8. However, even though things are going well, the community does occasionally disagree with the new updates, specifically the game going in a pay-to-win direction when they said they wouldn't, and them constantly removing content. But hey, it's Bethesda, they were bound to fuck it up eventually. Don't worry, they'll make up for it by re-releasing Skyrim, this time for the fucking microwave. They eventually added a small update where you could have pets and companions now, but their next major updates was with the Ghoul Within and Gone Fishing, making it so you could now become a ghoul and could go fishing. Fishing in a Fallout game. Never been done before. They also added a much needed revamp to the camp system, reducing the restrictions on the building capabilities, and their last update, in accordance with the next season of the TV show, was Burning Springs, adding a new area, new objectives, and the ghoul who was in the TV show. And they apparently have even more updates set to come out. So is the game actually in a good state now? Well, there are still bugs, but the game is in a better place than it ever was. This is the version of the game we should have got in 2018. But since then, they have built up the game to the point where now in 2026, the people that play it think it's a decent Fallout game. And the player count reflects that, with 20,000 people playing it through Steam daily, and that's not mentioning all the other players on different platforms. But by now, Fallout 76 has somewhat redeemed itself. It just took around 8 years to achieve that, and it still has a lot of bugs, but people are slowly but surely starting to notice the game is in a completely different state than what it was when it launched. Especially with content creators coming back to the game and witnessing how much the game has changed themselves. But the majority still think it's a bad game, and that's probably still down to the lasting effects of the launch, or because nobody wants to fuck with Bethesda. Especially after what they've done recently, like releasing Fallout New Vegas the Anniversary Edition, with the same game, no new features, just a few collectibles and an extortionate price tag. Just remaster the game at this point. If Obsidian made one of your best games in a fraction of the time it took you to make 4, it sounds like a relatively easy feat for Bethesda. But anyway, with how much Fallout 76 has changed, would I personally give it another chance? Fuck no. You know how much of a grind it is now? Unless I have my previous account moved to the Steam platform, which is apparently impossible, I am not getting myself what is essentially a full-time job grinding just to get a decent level. Yeah, no, fuck you.
I want you to go get me the platinum chip. I don't really know what it does, but I just know that you need to go get it. And then hopefully we can go to Hoover Dam together. I'll take you and get you a hot dog.
So Fallout 76 had one of the worst launches in Bethesda's or even gaming history. But even with the terrible launch, the game wasn't given up on. Yes, it wasn't immediate and there were some gaps, but they kept working on it, which is a decision that bore some fruit as a lot more people are picking up the game now, and it's nowhere near the mess it used to be. But as said, it still has a terrible reputation, which is slowly changing, especially recently because a lot more videos have been done on its current state, probably because the latest season of the TV show just ended. I don't think Todd is forcing people to play this game, but yeah, I'd still recommend picking this game up on sale if you do want to play it. But if you're replaying Vegas and you want some good loot on a prostate exam, go to Quarry Junction. And yep, that's all I had to say, and bye bye.